The Sikha we'll learn is, look, the Sikha Schedlik Chof Aleph, the first Sikha. This talks about the Parsha of Matan Torah, that in Chumash, in this Parsha, Parsha Yisrael, it says that it came, Chedesh Ashlishi, the third month, which is Chedesh Sivan, and this was Resh Chedesh. So the Pasuk says, Vayem Hazeh Bo Midbar Sinai. That's when the Eden came to Midbar Sinai. The next Pasuk says, they left Refidim, Vayaveya Midbar Sinai, Vayachanu Bamidbar. They came to Midbar Sinai, and they encamped in the desert. And then the Pasuk continues, Vayichan Shom Yisrael Neged Dehor. And Yisrael, the Eden, he encamped there. The word Vayichan is singular, and it goes on Yidden, so it says Vayichan Shom Yisrael Neged Dehor. On the east side of the mountain, the Yidden rested. But the word Vayichan is written singular. So the Rebbe says like this: from Pasuk Vayichan Shom Yisrael Neged Dehor, from this Pasuk where the Torah says Vayichan, he rested there, he Yidden Yisrael rested there, encamped there, Neged Dehor. So from this Pasuk is Rashi Maitik Deverte Vayichan Shom Yisrael. So Rashi quotes the words. Just the three words, Vayichan Shom Yisrael, and this Mefarish Rashi explains, Keish echad belev echad, like one man with one heart. Avasharka lachnuyas, but all the other encampments, all the other times they stopped, they rested, was betarumes, tarumes which complaints, or b'machleikas with arguments. Now, we learn the pashtas, as we learn simple pshat in Rashi, and the Meforshim learn that way, is the diuk in Pirish in Rashi via Mechilte. That what Rashi is trying to tell us is the same thing it says in the Mechilte. What does it say there? Adosh state vayichan loshen yochid. Here it says he rested, singular. Nit v'umetum v'shteit vayachanu loshen rabbi. Not in other places where it speaks about the Yidden encamping, resting. It says vayachanu plural. Is Rashi Mavayas? So Rashi explains why is it? Because the resting, the encampment at that time, distinct one, was they were all like one person, like one man, lay echad in one heart. But all the other encampments was betarumis b'machloikis, was with complaints and with arguments. The that's why all over it says vayachanu, because they did it in a form of many, because each one was different. Wasn't no achdus amongst them. But in this one, they were all like one man with one heart. That's why it says vayichan. That's the pshat in Rashi, simply the way Meforshim learn. According to this, the Rebbe says we have to understand. If the whole diuk of Rashi, the whole problem Rashi has, see, Rashi Bechlal wrote his Pirush, he only explains something when there's something not understood. But the Seder of Rashi is he doesn't write the kasha, usually. Sometimes he does for certain reasons. He just writes the pshat, and we figure out what the question was. So the way this Meforshim learn, what was the question of Rashi? Why does it say Vayichan Loshen Yochid? When they were talking about many people, why does it say Vayichan Loshen Yochid? If that's what the Rebbe asks, if that's the whole diuk of Rashi, hat der Rashi gedacht, meitig sein nur dem Wort Vayichan. So Rashi should have quoted from the Posik just the word Vayichan, because this is another rule in Rashi. The way the Rebbe learns, even the Dibur HaMaschil, the words that Rashi quotes from the Posik, on which he explains his and gives his commentary, is also bediuk. He only quotes those words from the Posik that are negated to his pshat. He doesn't quote any more words. So when Rashi is trying to explain here what the word Vayichan means, Vayichan is a problem. It says Vayichan, he rested, and should have said Vayachno. So Rashi should have just quoted the word Vayichan and explained that this is because it was Kiishach B'Leivechot. Pavos bringt Arop the Verte Shom Yisrael. Why does Rashi also quote from the Posik Vayichan Shom Yisrael? These are two. Rashi is not explaining anything about the Shom and about the Yisrael. Rashi just explaining what the Vayichan means. So he should have just quoted that. But then the Rebbe says like this. Das was Rashi bringt ich the word Shom Yashlemet. The question was, why does he bring the two extra words Shom and Yisrael? So the Rebbe says, I'll tell you the truth. But negate the word Shom is not a kasha. You could explain why Rashi brings the word Shom. Why? The Rashi is eich dos v'shar kol achnuyas betarumas and machlekes. According to Rashi, this that in the other encampments, it was all with complaints and with arguments. How do we know that? Lernt man up, nicht nur wie Mechilte, von dem was dort steht, v'yachnon loshen rabbi, nor von dem posse gufa v'yichan shom. Rashi learns that how do you know? See, basically Rashi has two things in this Rashi. Number one, that in this case it was Loshen Yochid. Ki ish echad b'leiv echad. But the other times, it was with machlekes and with complaints. How do we know that the other times were machlekes and complaints? So the Mechilta seems to learn because over there it says Vayachanu. By all the other times the Eden encamped, the Eden rested, the Eden stopped. It says Vayachanu Loshen Rabbi. From there we know that it was Loshen Rabbi and machlekes. Rashi seems like learns it from the word Vayechan Shom. Since it says Loshen Yochid only Shom here, meaning there by Har Sinai, that's where it was Vayichan. So from that we learn out as B'leis Shom is given Valicha Loshen Yochid. That only there, in this case, it was Loshen Yochid, singular, Ki ish echad b'leiv echad, like one person with one heart. Unid by Shara Chanias, not by other Chanias. Because the word Shom is a diuk. It's extra word. So Shom means there and not someplace else. So this is a reason why Rashi quotes the word Shom, because Rashi says two things. That here it was the Achdus, the other times it wasn't Achdus. How do we know that? So when Rashi says these two things, so he quotes from the pasuk two words, Vayichan, here it was Loshen Yochid, and Shom means here and not someplace else. So that is the raya for the second half of Rashi. V'adarabba, the Rebbe says, even more, nor from danet veis from Ashara Chanis v'tarumas u'machlekes. Only from this word Shom we know that the rest of the times it was with complaints and with arguments. Miyatura de cross Shom, because the word Shom is extra. But Dosaber was a state Vayachnu. But the fact that by other places it says Vayachnu Loshen Rabim is no raya, it was with tarumas and machlekes. Can sein kipshute, can be simple. Es redt sich wegen etliche verschiedene Menschen, Shvotim. Since we're talking about many people, different Shvotim, that's why it says Loshen Rabim. In other words, the fact that it says by other times that they rested, it says Loshen Rabim is no raya, it was machlekes. Loshen Rabim is normal. If there are a lot of people did it, so you could say Loshen Rabim. Aber sein Klaunli be machlekes et tarumas same say. They could be Loshen Rabim, but that doesn't mean they were arguing. Because how could you learn out from the word Vayachna, since by other times it says Vayachna Loshen Rabim, means they had machlekes. So that's why Rashi learns, how do we know that there was a machlekes? Not from the fact that it says Vayachna. Since it says here, Vayichan Shom, over there, meaning by Har Sinai was Loshen Yochid, and the word Shom is extra, it could have said Vayichan, because Vayichan Yisrael Neged Hor. Why does it have to say Shom? Teaches you here and not someplace else. From there we know it. So we know why Rashi brings the word Shom, because it's negated to Rashi's Pirush that in other times it was the machlekes, and that we know from the word Shom. It bleibt aber die Scheile, but the question is, always bringt Rashi Europa ich dann weiter die Wort Yisrael. But the question is, why does he bring the word Yisrael? He should have said Vayichan Shom. So from the word Vayichan Shom we could know Loshen Yochid, because here it was Shom tells you that other places not, so we know other places it wasn't. And that's what Rashi says, and that's why he brings Vayichan Shom. But the word Yisrael is not negated to Rashi's Pirush. Why does Rashi bring it? The question is even more. By Rashi bringing the word Yisrael, it's almost as if he's ruining his own pshat. Rashi is mighty the word Yisrael. By bringing the word Yisrael, that word makes Rashi's Pirush hard to understand. When we bald the state der Loshen Yisrael, since it says the word Yisrael, was meant Ali Eden vi ein Klal fold. When it says Yisrael, it goes on Klal Yisrael as one unit, as one nation. Because the by Masim, the Loshen Yochid, the Vayichan Loshen Yochid. So the word Vayichan fits. How do we know from the word Vayichan? Because it says Loshen Yochid. Zerayet was all Ba'ardes. Since it goes on Yisrael, means Yidden as a Klal. So the word Vayichan could go on the Klal. Whether it was Ba'ardes or not is not Negeyeh. Because we know that a lot of times it says Loshen Yochid when we're talking about even many, but if it's one unit. So the word Yisrael is almost like against the Pshat of Rashi. Rashi says we must say, since it says Loshen Yochid is a simon, it was all Ki Shecha B'Leiv Echad. But the pasuk says Yisrael. And if you're talking about Yisrael as a klal, you could use Vayichan even if it wasn't Ba'ardes. So Rashi, by bringing the word Yisrael, is bringing a word which makes his Pshat hard. So how do we know that Vayichan Loshen Yochid means Ki Shechad B'Leiv Echad? Maybe it means Vayichan Loshen Yochid because it's talking about Klal Yisrael as well, and that we see from the word Yisrael. So if Rashi wouldn't have brought down the word Yisrael, it'd be a problem. But the Peil Rashi is not stressing that word. But Rashi not only says his pshat, he brings the word Yisrael, which seems to be saying that it's a klal. So then it seemingly ruins his pshat, makes his pshat harder to understand. L'chura can man sagen, as Rashi's hechrech is nicht as if von dem Schienen Vayichan for sich. L'chura you can say like this: Rashi's raya that when it says Vayichan means that it was Kishach B'Levechot is not just from the word Vayichan, because it says Vayichan, Lashon Yochid, that means they were all like one. And we just asked the Kasha, what's the Raya? Maybe because it's Klal Yisrael, so it says one. Rasha's Raya is not from the word Vayichan itself, but from the Mshinu in the Posik Gufe, because the Posik changes. Früher steht in Posik Vayachna Bamidbar Lashon Rabin. First in the Posik it says they rested in the desert. There it says Lashon Rabin. Take steht Vayichan Shom Lashon Yochid. Later it says Vayichan Lashon Yochid. Von der, was in ein Hemshech HaKosev is the Teira Meshanet from Vayachan to Vayichan, from the fact that in one Posik, one Hemshech, the Teira changes. First it says Vayachnu, then it says Vayichan is Muchach. That proves as Neged the Horzain is a given Kishach B'Levechot. So the Teira is trying to tell you something. Why would the Teira change? The fact that you could use the word Vayichan even if it wasn't Ba'achdas, as long as it's talking about the Klal as one, you could use the word Vayichan. But the fact that the Torah first says Vayachnu, which makes sense because there were many people, it says Vayachnu, and then the Torah changes in the same posik, in the same hemsech, and says Lashon Yochid. From that we know Kishach B'Levechot. So that answers the Shaila. How did Rasha know Kishach B'Levechot from the word Vayicham Lashon Yochid? Maybe it's because it's a klal. But the Rebbe says you can't say that. That cannot be. We have to understand that. Became his B'Teira as in themselves posik u'behem shechechot v'en b'negei Am Yisrael gezog beide l'shenis. We find in other psukim where it talks about Klal Yisrael and it says in the same posik, in the same hemshech, it says both Lashon Rabim and Lashon Yochid, plural or singular. And the Rebbe gives examples. If in weiter by Parsha saying that says later on by Matan Torah in the Parsha by Yar Ha'om, the nation saw, they saw Matan Torah. So it says Vayar, it doesn't say Vayiru they saw. It says Vayar he saw, singular. And the posik right away continues Vayonu, and they shook. They. And they stood from far. So we see in the same posuk you could use both. Uneichen the Friedrich said the previously said by Kriya Samson it says Vayar Yisrael Yodagdelo. The Yidden saw his big hand, and it says Vayar he saw Lashon Yochid, and then it says and because of that Vayiru home. So the nation they were afraid. Vayaminu and they believed in Moshe and they b'shter in the Moshe. So we see it's not a problem to use in the same posuk. Once Lashon Rabim or Yochid, one Lashon Rabim. So you can't say that Rasha knows that it means that they were all ba'achdas Kishach B'Levechot from the fact that the posik in the same posik first uses Lashon Rabim, then Lashon Yochid is a simon is trying to tell you something. That's no simon on anything. That's the seder of the psukim. Sometimes it says like that. So Mela it says here. So Mela, we're back to the kasha. How does Taki Rasha know that when it says Vayichan, it means because it's Lashon Yochid Kishach B'Levechot. Maybe it's Vayichan because we're talking about Yisrael. Vayichan Shem Yisrael. So on Yidden, you could say Lashon Vayichan. Before it says Vayichan, there's no problem because sometimes that happens. Part of the pumpets in the posuk says Lashon Rabim, then it says Lashon Yochid is possible. So that's one kasha. We also have to understand. The Mokif from Pirush Rashi Pasha is from Mechilta. Pasha, the source of Rashi is from the Mechilta. But the Lashon of Mechilta is, you look at the Lashon of the Mechilta, it's different. And Rebbe quotes the Lashon of the Mechilta. The Mechilta says like this: Kol Mokim Sho Eimer Vayisu Vayachnu. Other places all over where it says they traveled and they encamped. They traveled with arguments and they rested with arguments. But here, here they were all with one heart. That's why it says that the Yisrael rested neged Dahor. So this is the Lashon in the Mechilta. Now, if you compare the Mechilta to Rashi, you'll see like this: for the Shinuyim Tzishin Lashon Rashi and Lashon Mechilta. So Rebbe quotes some of the differences between the way it says in Mechilta and the way it says in Rashi. In Mechilta state kan hu shekulam leiv echad. Mechilta says here they all had one heart. Rashi is mefared kishach b'leiv echad. Rashi says like one person and all one heart. Rashi adds the words kishach. That's number one. Number two, in Mechilta state neisim v'chayim that they traveled and they rested with machlekes, but in Pirush Rashi stay in Tzveilishin, in Tarumas and machlekes. Rashi says they were complaining and machlekes in argument. The Rashi adds the word Tarumas. Third thing, in Mechilta 50 the Kach Namar Vishin Shom Yisrael Neged Dahor. Mechilta finishes off, and therefore, since they were one heart, therefore it says Vayichan Shom Yisrael Neged Dahor, that he rested, Yidden rested, he Neged Dahor by the mountain. So the Mechilta quotes also the word neged Dahor. When Rashi stellt sich nur auf Vayichan Shem Yisrael and is nicht meitig neged Dahor. And Rashi does not quote the word neged Dahor. Rashi just explains it in the words Vayichan Shem Yisrael, not the words neged Dahor. And the Mechilta brings neged Dahor also. So whenever there's a difference, we have to understand what is the reason and what is so to speak, the differences between the Pshat according to the Mechilta and the Pshat according to Rashi. We also have to understand this. The same Teichen of Rashi saying here, we find in another Seder earlier, with changes, a little bit different. Where is that? That's in Parshas Parsha B'Shalach. From the Pasuk where it says, Vayisa b'no Yisrael l'saneyim, when Parah chased the Yidden, it says the Yidden picked up their eyes. V'hinei Mitzrayim neisei achreim. And behold, Mitzrayim is riding behind them, but it says neisei aloshin yochid. He, talking about Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim goes on all the Egyptians. But it says neisei. Is Rasha ma'iti dibet neisei achreim. Rasha quotes the words, he is riding behind them. When it's Mafarash, Rasha says, why does it say Loshen Yochid? With one heart, they all went with one heart, like one person. There, when Rasha explains that he doesn't quote the word Mitzrayim. Rasha quotes the word Neisei Achreim, even though the Pasuk says Mitzrayim Neisei Achreim, but Rasha doesn't bring the word Mitzrayim. Whereas Yem the word Yisrael. Not like it says here, where Rasha quotes the words Vayichan Shom Yisrael. So it talks about the people. And Rashi quotes that word. There it says Mitzrayim, but Rashi doesn't quote it. When the Tamba Pashtas Ish Canal, and the simple reason why, Rashi doesn't want to quote the word Mitzrayim. If Rashi would quote Mitzrayim, which means we're talking about Mitzrayim as one unit, it would contradict his pshat. Rashi is trying to say, why does it say Losh Yochid? He is riding behind them to tell you that they were all together. What's the ayah? Because it says Losh Yochid Neseya. But it says Mitzrayim Nitzayah. So if you look at the word Mitzrayim, Mitzrayim is a unit of Mitzrayim. So that's why it says Lashon Yochid. It's no raya that is because they were all together. The Baldas Batzitz some folk, it's all one unit. So that's why Rashi over there doesn't quote the word Mitzrayim. Okay, so Rashi did that for that reason. But the Rebbe asks, but the question that asked, number one, so Rashi doesn't quote it. But you can't take away the fact that it says there. The Peil the Pasuk says Mitzrayim Nisei If the say said Diuk Rasha b'Lev Echad, that contradicts Rasha. Rasha proves from the word Nisei Loshen Yochid that they were all b'Lev Echad. They're all like one. What's the raya? Because it says Loshen Yochid, but it says Mitzrayim Nisei. So you could say on the whole unit of Mitzrayim you could use Loshen Yochid. The same like the Rebbe asked Bashayla here. What's Rasha's raya over here? That from the word Vayichan. Loshen Yochid means that they were all together. Maybe it is because it was Israel. We're talking about the unit of Eden, so you could use Loshen Yochid. The same question there. Second question over there. What's the Rasha might give the word Achreim? Why is Rasha, when he quotes the words from the Pasuk, he says Neisei Achreim? It's a similar kasha like over here. Why does it quote the word Neisei? The whole Rasha is trying to explain the word Neisei. Why does it say Loshen Yochid singular? So Rasha should have quoted the word Neisei and explained. What's negated the word Achreim after them? And the third question, the Pirusha Kam Parsha Seinu, is there Seder Ki Ish Echad B'Lev Echad by us in the Parsha. It says Ki Ish Echad, like one man, like one person with one heart. And there is the opposite way. B'Lev Echad Ki Ish Echad, with one heart like one person. And there is definitely a diuk. The Bir calls that explanation, isn't it? The Rebbe explains it beautifully, mamish. Those says when the Gei Arabim or the Rakanzel folk Vetel Pomi Genus Losh Rabban Amol Losh Yochid. This that when we talk about many people doing something, a whole nation doing something. And sometimes we find Loshen Yochid, as we said before, that for a unit you could say Loshen Yochid. And sometimes you could use Loshen Rabim because there are many people doing it. So a simple pshat, it makes sense to say, and this is a logical thing. Ados is when it's talking about something that was done. When something is done by a group, there are two ways that it's done. And that's why sometimes we could say Lashon Yochid. I'm never explains. If a whole bunch of people do a certain act and they do it all together in the same way, all like one, then you could say Lashon Yochid. They're all doing the same thing, and because it's one group doing the same thing, so it's all one. You could say Lashon Yochid. Wenn die Pule wird getan bei einem Rabbim durch verschiedene Menschen von der Kvutze Volk, wird gesagt bei Lashon Rabbim. If the same thing, when they do something, and it's done to many people, but each one does it differently, then it would say Loshen Rabbim. Then you would speak plural, because they're different. There's nothing here that will make him into one unit because each one is doing it differently. So when they're talking about doing something, so then you could, and a group is doing, so if they all do it in the same way, then you could use Lashon Yochid. If they all do it, each one in a different way, but they're all doing it, you could say Lashon Rabin. But when we talk about a feeling, or understanding, or something in your understanding, your intellect, with many people, was in them is doch ein day same when in feeling, you can't say that two people have the same feeling. Everyone is different. The Gemara says the das is not the same. The Rebbe adds the regish, the feeling is not the same. The Salomon and the Fanim Rabbi. So we're talking about the feeling. Even when many people do have a certain feeling, it's always Lashon Rabin. Because if it's done in Rabim dika ways, in many ways, so when you say they did it, you won't say he did it because they're different doings. So when it comes to a pu'ula, sometimes it could be Lashon Rabin, sometimes Lashon Yochid. But when it's a feeling, it's always Rabin because there's no such thing as two people having all the people having the same feeling. All the people could be doing the same thing. That could be. They do one thing, they're all like one. But the feeling is everyone is individual. Everyone has his feeling. The male there, you would always use Lashon Rabin. The Riber is not Kentmiya was Megifin, therefore you can't question. We find as we engage them, Klauf and Nafol Gum and Nutzer Posik Beidem Lashenes. That sometimes we see the Posik should use two expressions. Part of the Posik will say Lashon Rabim, and part of it say with Lashon Yochid. Say Lashon Rabim, say Lashon Yochid. Lepomim Afilabeide name Posik. And sometimes not only in one Hemshech you say Rabim and Yochid, sometimes in the same Posik, you're talking about the same group, and you would use part once Lashon Yochid and once Lashon Rabim. So the Rebbe, I'll tell you why. Because it depends what the Lashon that we're saying depends on. And he explains. And he gives the example. Let's take the example of the Posek we mentioned. By Yari Yisrael Sayodak Delo, Yidden saw, the nation saw the big hand, and here it says Lashon Yochid. He saw, and it says Vayirahom, and they were afraid. The nation was Vayamin, and they believed. So it's very simple. Vayar, when they saw, from the Eden, that's something that happened. The Eden saw. Was meant they saw they saw what Abish did to Mitzrayim. Seien sie alle gewähren gleich in them. They were all equal. They all saw the same thing. The fathers Vayar Lashon Yochid. It's something that happened. And they all happened the same thing. They all saw the same thing. So it says Lashon Yochid. Or in Zeir Yirem Hashem, but their fear of Hashem, when in Zeir Vayamin of Hashem, and they're believing in Hashem, Yidoch sicher gewähren kama v'kama madreges, darges. In that, there were many, many levels. In them is given by Yirah by Yaminu Lashon Rabim. So there, everyone was afraid, had the Yiras Hashem. Each one different. That's a feeling. Everyone had a munah. That's a feeling. But yet, everyone in a separate eifim. So we see the Rebbe explained Al Piseichel why in that same pasuk you could have Lashon Rabim, Lashon Yochid. Depends what we're talking about. We're talking about something that they're all the same, which is usually something that was happening. Then you could use Lashon Yochid. But when it speaks about the feeling that because of what they saw equally, each one had a feeling, the feeling is different. So here we say Lashon Rabim because each one was different. Al der Zeb negate and posting with Parashat Seine goes the other posting that it said, Vayarohom, Vayanu, Vayam Tebarochin. The nation saw Matan Torah, but it says Lashon Yochid. He saw, and they shook, and they stood far. So here also, in the Inyan from Vayar, in seeing they were all the same. There's one scene, the male, they're all like one. So you could use Lashon Yochid. Look at like we said before. Mashenka Vayanu, but the shaking, the shivering, that's a feeling. Vayam de Merochak, they stood far away. That's connected with what they felt. They felt scared. They felt that they can't be there. That's a feeling that comes. It's Masim Lashon Rabim. Here you say Lashon Rabim to leave them because they're different ways. Each one had the feeling a different way. So this Rebbe explains now why sometimes we could have in the same posik, Lashon Yochid, Lashon Rabim, depends on what. It's something that they all do, they could all do the same. But if it's something that they feel, it's never the same. In doing, sometimes could be also the same. And sometimes not the same. So sometimes it could be Lashon Yochid, Lashon Rabim. But this is a clear thing that when it comes to feeling, it's always Lashon Rabim. So now let's go to the psukim, side the posik by Mitzrayim, side the posik here. In the posik of Pareh Hikre, by Yisuf b'nei Yisrael's name in the Mitzrayim Nesei this posik where it says, Pareh got close, the Yidden, they picked up their eyes, and Hine Mitzrayim, Nesei Achreim, and they saw Mitzrayim riding behind them. but Neseya Loshen Yochid. So it talks about Mitzrayim riding behind them, Achreyem Loshen Yochid. Now, is this a pula or is this a feeling? That's what we have to analyze here. What would we think? We say Parei was Mitzrayim was Neseya Achreyem. Now, Neseya is a fact. Say they were riding. That they could all do the same. But when it says Neseya Achreyem, doesn't mean that they were riding. Is the Adgosha Nitef Neseya, the express is not that they were riding, they saw them riding. Pulas Anasiya, Poshet, that they were going. Nor if Achreyem. They're riding after them, which means they were chasing them. They're Mechuvan Anasiya. What was the purpose? Why were they riding? This was a chasing them. The chasing them means they had a feeling they wanted to catch the Eden. They had a feeling that Pari changed his mind and he was chasing the Eden. It was their feeling, all the bad. That was why they say chasing. Chasing is not it's a fact. They're chasing. But the word, you could ride the same way and not chase. The person could ride the same speed. If he's riding, it's a fact, you're riding. If he's chasing somebody, then he's trying to get him. There's a feeling behind it. He hates the guy. He doesn't want the guy. Und in dem seine nicht alle Mitzrayim gewähnt gleich. Sicher seine Mechulik. The feeling of the Rishas to the Yidden, they're not all the same. There were differences. Pare was the worst. Then Yachatum Mitzrayim, you had the magicians. Die was eine given Yoretz Var Hashem. Some people were afraid of the words of Hashem. Und die was lei Yoretz Var Hashem. The people were not afraid. Und wir fragen die was haben sich gebeten bei Pare in the Zohar Ruslos and Mitzrayim. Certainly those people who asked Pare to let the Yidden go out. So this is something that has a feeling. And in a feeling, they're all different. And this is what we say, and we understand that the feeling of the Mitzrayim against the Eden were all different. Sure, it should have said Losharabim. So when the Posik says Neisei Achreyem, Rashi has a problem. Why does it say Loshen Yochid? If it would say Neiseya, I would understand Loshen Yochid, because they all did the same pula. They all were riding. But since the Torah is trying to tell, they were chasing the Eden, which means they were riding after them and they were expressing their feeling of hating the Eden. Definitely, this feeling, there were different people. So it should have said here, certainly should have said Neisim Achreyem. Is Rashi Mefarashim Achad? That's why Rashi comes and tells us, I'll explain to you why it says Loshen Yochid. Rashi is Machad because it's V'lei Echad Ki Ish Echad. With one heart, like one man. As Adarabe. Das, was steht, Neseya Loshen Yochid, the far was a Neseya given Achreyem noch Yogen the Eden. Why did it say Loshen Yochid? Because what they were doing, they were chasing the Eden. In dem noch Yogen the Eden, was they given, nicht mehr kann meinen, as in dem seine given Chiluki mit Zad, weil der of the Sugim Shenim Anal. So you might think, the Pasuk is telling you that you might think that since they were chasing the Eden, which means they had a feeling of hatred to the Eden expressed in their chasing, so there were different levels. So the Torah is trying to tell you, Bedavke, that in this case there were no different levels. There is alles eine given Leib Echad. They all had one heart. Mit ein Hart was is full mit Sinnetim. They all had the same Sinnet to the Eden. Und das hat Gerim given as is ein Kish Echad. And that brought about that they all did the fact, the pull like one person. So Rashi is trying to tell, the Posuk is trying to tell, that's what Rashi explained. So we understand why Rashi quotes the word Achreyem. The question was, if he's trying to say Neseya Loshen Yochid means they were all one, why does he quote the word Achreyem? That's the whole point here. The point of Rashi is doing, when it says Neseya Achreyem means not that they were riding, traveling, but they were chasing them, which means they were chasing them because they wanted to catch them, they didn't like them. So you would think that when it comes to a feeling, each one is different. So the Torah is Machadish. Neseya Achreyem Loshen Yochid, they all had the same feeling. Not that the whole had the same feeling. That's why the pale, they were like one person. So we start off with B'leiv Echad. The M is, normally you don't have a Leiv Echad. In Leiv, it's not all the same. In this case, it was a chidush that they all were great Rishoyim and they all hated the Eden equally. But B'meil, it turned out to be Shechot. The fathers that say that, that's what Rashi writes first, B'leiv Echad Ki Shechot. Because it started off, the chidush is that it was B'leiv Echad, which normally was not be. Leiv is not Echad, because they're all different. But here they were all the same hatred. And they're all the same hatred. That's why they went Ki Shechot. They all went like one person. They all went together. The same way we'll explain in our posting where it says, Yidden, he rested there, Negadahor. But again, that's some chniya b'mavona post from the Yidden. In Yanam Ort is the posting media free by Yachman Midbar. The mere fact that they rested there, that the posting says before, by Yachman Midbar, the posting says before, they rested in the Midbar. Muss man sagen, Ados von der Posting is Meisi, by Yichan Shom Yisrael Negadahor. when the Torah adds that the Yidden rested there by the mountain, kum zum Avaya sein, then vayachnu, comes to explain, when we said before in the Pasuk, it says that they rested, which is a normal Lashon, nothing wrong with that Lashon, they rested, comes the Pasuk and adds a word, vayichan sham Yisrael, to teach you what way did they rest. Zeir eif nachnieh, the way they rested, unachonah to Kabbalas HaTorah, that the resting was a preparation to Matan Torah. Was they dort gedacht from Kabbalas that you had to accept the Torah. So the Pasuk is really telling you that they rested there, and what's that they rested? The Torah is telling what they did there. What was the purpose of their being there? Not to tell you the fact that they came there and they stopped, they camped there. That it says already. So the Pasuk is trying to add something here that is trying to tell you in what way they rested. Stellt to the Shaila, when we talk about that in the way that they rested, that this means that they made a hachonah, they were getting ready to Matan Torah. Now, getting ready to Matan Torah is a feeling. And by a feeling, you say Lashon Rabim. Stellt to the Shaila, the hachonah nafshis, und der Rotzen hachonah zu Matan Torah, der bei jedem Mieten gewöhnlich, wie Madrigosim, Asavei Ruchni. Since that's the feeling, hachonah, it's in the nefesh. So the Torah is trying to tell you extra words, vayichan shom, to tell you, trying to explain how the vayachna was, what way it was, that they were getting ready. Now they're getting ready, that's the feeling you have. So here, Bedavke should have said vayachna, because it's the Matzav Ruchni. By everyone, it was in his Madrege, and the Shribat Zweiten, different by another. On the thing, it gives examples. Meshe, start with Meshe, then you have Aaron, you have the Shivim Skenim, and andere Fashion in the darkest, different levels, Bisa, Zad, Dargi, and Seah, Shein, different. Even the very low Yid, we find that even after Kriyas Yamsuf, the Yidden questioned, is Hashem amongst us? So we see many, many levels from Yidden. So here it should have said, they rested, because as we said before, the cloud, when it comes to a feeling, everyone is different. So by Mitzrayim, B'Teres Takim Achadish. Normally the feeling is different, but in this case, they all had the same feeling. The question is here too. How could the Torah say that? It says by the Torah is by Yichad Sham Yisrael to tell you that they rested, meaning they had a certain hachana, they were doing something, and it was the hachana to Matan Torah. Why does it say Lashon Yochid? Should have said Lashon Rabin. For Rashan is mighty from posing the word Vayichan Sham Yisrael. That's why Rasha quotes the words Vayichan Sham and Yisrael. But not the word Negador. That was the question. Rasha doesn't say Mechilta does say. Rasha doesn't say. But why does he quote the words Shom Yisrael? It should say Vayichan, and that's it. So Rasha tells you, as don't mean their posik as Alt Yisrael zayin alle gewen ki shechot. It's trying to tell you that they were all like one because they were all Yisrael. They're all Yidden, so they all felt that we're all part of the same group. We're all part of a Yiddish folk. Und nicht in Zazeh ständig wie der Geseim und der Achone Berotz und Negadas und Makabas and the Torah. It's not, the Pasuk is not trying to tell you that they were one as far as their Hachone to Matan Torah. Because the Hachone to Matan Torah, you're not one. Hachone is feeling, how you feel in Nefesh. The Pasuk is trying to tell you a different word here. That because Vayichan Shom Yisrael, because they all felt that they're all part of one cloud, they're all part of Yidden, that made them all to be one. So it starts off that the reason that it says Vayichan is because Keish Echad. It was not the Leiv Echad. Leiv Echad wouldn't be. So over there by Mitzrayim, it was Leiv Echad. They started because they're not Keish Echad. They're different. But because the Leiv Echad, they hated Yidden. So maybe they did the same thing altogether. Here it's the other way. Here, the Pasuk is trying to tell you that it was Rash. It's not the negative order did it. It's not because they got close to Har Sinai. The reason was because they came to a point where they started realizing that we're Yisrael. That's what the Rasha called Vayichan Shom Yisrael. Because of Yisrael there was Vayichan. Und die Art ist aber, sie haben gerufen, sie soll sein Belev Echad. Now that they all were Keish Echad, they all said, you know what, we're all like one. So it's not that they had one with their Achonis. The one was because they're Yisrael. That, since they became one, they felt one because they're all Yidden, that brought out Belev Echad, alle mit ein themselves Marotzen, Belev some Kabbas on the table. Mela, since they all got united, that made that their feeling to Matan Torah should also be one. So therefore, first comes the Ish Echad, because their whole Achta started from Ish and then became Belev Echad. Das ist the Shinner Hefresh zwischen dem Belev Echad Ish Echad by the Mitzrayim und dem Kish Echad Belev Echad. This makes a difference between being one heart and one man, one person by Mitzrayim, and by Eden, here by Matan Torah, ki ish echad b'leiv echad. By Mitzrayim is zeir ven ki ish echad yikumen als mesuve von dem b'leiv echad and nesei achreim. By them, why were they ki ish echad? Why were they all like one, trying to do the same thing? Because it started, their hatred was. Because you saw they were nesei achreim, they were chasing the Eden, achreim, that's the whole word, not nesei. Nesei is a pula, that could be different. That could be all one. Because they were nesei achreim, they were chasing, and the Torah is trying to tell you should know, even though normally feeling is not the same by everybody, in this case it was the same. They were chasing noch the Eden. But they themselves were not like one. Rasha quotes only the words Nesei Achreim. And need them free to convert Mitzrayim Nesei Achreim. The Rebbe has a shayla, why doesn't he quote the word Mitzrayim? Like here he quotes Yisrael. Because the word Mitzrayim would mean that they were one because they were all from Mitzrayim, all from the same group. The Pasuk is trying to tell us not that. They all were like one because they hated the Eden the same way. Not because it's Mitzrayim as a group. Mashenke Parshasenu was by Eden the Ardes, Ki Shechot given, mitzad dem Gufa b'zayin Eden. By us it's Farker. What the Torah is trying to tell us? Why were they one? Because they're all Eden. Ki Shechot. They're all like one person Eden. Und the Riber is do Rasha Maitik Umatish Nevayicha Shem Yisrael. That's what Rasha here wants to say. It is connected to the word Yisrael. When the Ardes is Bazei Arud gerufen, and since they had Ardes as being Ki Shechot, already that caused the next step that the Takis started becoming B'leiv Echad also to Kabbalah Satira. So this is according to Rashi. Like the Mechilta aber hat sich sehr anders gesagt in dem was Hush v'kulam Leiv Echad. The Mechilta says, doesn't mention Ki ish echad. The Mechilta says that they were one, like with one heart. Alle Yidden haben sich glichen, no ma Leiv rotz nechet zu Kabbalah Satira. They all had the same will to Torah, Kabbalah Satira. So therefore, the Rebbe feared to is the Mechilta, lekach nemer v'yichan sham Yisrael neged ha'or. One of the differences Mechilta and Rashi is the Mechilta finishes, and they were all like one, and like it says, v'yichan sham Yisrael neged ha'or, neged the mountain, which is Matan Torah. Rashi doesn't bring it. Because in Rashi, the Posik v'yichan is not because it was Achonat to Matan Torah. It was because it is Yisrael. And the Melech brought out the Matan Torah also. The Mechilta doesn't say Ki Shechot. The Mechilta says, Lechil learns differently, that they had all the same Achonat to Matan Torah, and that's why he quotes the word neged ha'or. Apia now, according to this, as late Rashi is dort zwei inyonim. Ki Shechot artes v'shniden. According to Rashi, there are two things stuck here. The Artes started Ki Shechot because they're all Yidden, come from the fact of the Yidden, not because of their Achon Be'etzim was the same by all. Then you have another one, which is they had one will to Kabbalah Satira. So now that Rashi brings these two things, and Rashi had to bring these two things, the way the Rebbe explained. That one of the questions Rebbe asked, why does Rashi say two expressions? Till now it was betarumas, was with complaints and with arguments. The Mechilta doesn't say that. Now we understand. The Posuk is Madish by Yichan Shom Yisrael, since the Posuk stresses. By Yichan Shom Yisrael, it's verstanden, also die Art is given place Shom Bam Bar Sinai. Like we said before, Shom means only there. Only by Har Sinai was this artist. The other times they were camped was with Tarumas and Machlekes. So Rashi says these two things connected the difference between the other times and by Har Sinai. By Allah, by the other times, there was the opposite of Artis in both things. There was Machlekes. What's Machlekes? Zwischen sich, amongst Yidden, which is Hepech from Ki Shechot. It was the opposite. Here it was Ki Shechot, all the Yidden were united. Besides being Yidden, there they were fighting. And Tarumas, they were complaining against who? Against the Eibishter. Being from the Eibishter, they were complaining about the Eibishter, which is the Hepech from Belev Echad to Kabbalah Satira, which is the opposite of all feeling to Kabbalah Satira. Because they still now their feeling to the Eibishter became very strong. They wanted to exhibit Torah, but other times they didn't have that. So Rashi quotes these two because these two are the opposite. Because we learn now that whatever is here is only here. Vayichan Shom by this case, not in the other cases. So the same thing we say that happened here, and the way Rashi learns Ki Shechot B'leiv Echad was not by the other cases. And the other cases, Rashi says, were both sides zwischen Yidden. It wasn't Achdus and side because of the Eibishter. It wasn't such a Achdus in Kabbalah Satira. But the Mechilta, who doesn't learn that there were these two things, so the Mechilta doesn't say Tarumas, because he's only talking about one thing, about Kabbalah Satira. That's what the Mechilta only says, that they had Leiv Echad, which is their Achonat to Matan Torah. Now we're going to learn the Chassidus of Rashi. So the Rebbe explains like this. The world on its own is called a Reshus Rabbi, a public domain. What does it mean, a public domain? Achdus is the Eibush. The Eibush is unity. In the world, there are so many different things. It's Rabbim. In welchem is nicht beile die Scheiches of Verbund von einer Sache mit der Zweiten. You don't see clearly the connection one thing to the other. Be'emes, there is Achdus, but you don't see. Look at the world, everything is separate. Und da sagt sich Aruis in der Mina Medaber bifnei atzmai. And you see that in people. Not only in, there are people as one group, and then you have Tzemeach and that. In people itself, you also have this inyan that you have different differences. Ubifrat, especially that the Rebbe of Ashafim dimension in an Eifim was Einechet Mem Deim Alachavere. The Rebbe make people that there's not one looks the same as another. Or in the same Shabbos, their minds are not the same. And das wirkt eich auf die Pulus von the mention. And that there are differences, there are many, has an effect on the Pulus, the behavior of people. Which is done through the seichel of a person, the feeling of a person. Die Pulus von einem Mensch, seine nicht bei dem und bis er feeling gegensatz zu the Pulus von zweiten Menschen. That what one person does is not the same like another person, and sometimes they're even opposites. It's all because the Welt is not Achdus, the Welt is Riboy. The Inyan Achdus in Welt is verbunden mit dem Gilu von Beirei Echad, Hashem Echad. The Achdus that there is in Welt is if there is a revelation of the Creator, which is Hashem Echad. What's the Secher for Welt? The Eibush is beyond the world. That's Achdus. So if there would be a Gilu, and there is a Gilu in Welt of the Eibush there, then there's Achdus. But without that Gilu, the Welt is Riboy. Or the Meat can memorize on the Mechiluk zwischen the Mechilta and Pirush Rashi. This will explain the difference the way the Mechilta learns and Rashi. The Gilu von Hashem Echad in Welt tut sich auf durch zwei Sachen, welche seine Hecher von Welt. What causes the Gilu of Achdus in the world, which is the Gilu of the Eibush of Hashem Echad? Things which are beyond the world. Inside the world itself, there is no Achdus. There are things that are beyond the world which could have a hashpah on the world. And what is that? Teir on Yisrael. Teir in Eden. Was zu Libzei, beschaffen geworden the world. Rashi says in the beginning of Reishis, the world was created b'shvil Yisrael, b'shvil HaTeirah. And if you have the Eden working with Teirah in the world, you're Megal in the world, Achdus. So later, Mechilte had the Gilik from Matan Teirah, was his Hecher from Welt gepeilt of the Eden noch früher. Now we say, according to Mechilte, we said before, the Achdus came only in one thing. The Achdus was in Kabbalah HaTeirah. Not like Rashi said, the Achdus was because they were all Yidden together, but Mele, they had a feeling to Matan Teirah. It started from Matan Teirah. But we're not talking now about the time of Matan Teirah. This pasuk is talking about Rosh Chodesh Sivan, which is 6 days before Matan Teirah. So the Mechilta says like this, that this Hashpoah, that Teirah, and in this case we're talking about Matan Teirah, has on the world to bring Achdus in the world. So this had Hashpoah on the Yidden in a Zman from Erev Matan Teirah, even earlier before the Teirah was given. Hashem demoed right away then, when they came to Midbar Sinai, so they all had one heart, all equal heart, so Makabas and the Teirah to receive the Teirah. So it comes out that the Mechilta learns that the Gilui that was supposed to cause the Achdus in Welt was Teirah. And that had Hashpah even before Matan Teirah, which is the day they came to Har Sinai. Aber like Pirush Rashi, Pshutische Mikra, die bald as Lepel is dann gewähnt des Mann von Far Matan Teirah. Since at this time it was still before Matan Teirah. Kann man nicht sagen, dass der Gilui Bossi that früher gepeilt of Achdus. How could you say that Teirah, Matan Teirah, already caused the Achdus in the Eden, which was before the Teirah was given? In Pshat, you can't say that. That's something that's going to be in the future. So how was there Achdus? According to Rashi, since it was before Matan Teirah, it's not the Teirah that made the Achdus. What's the second thing that brings Achdus to the world? Yidden. Nor the Achdus, they come to the Eden Gufa, that came from the Eden. That the Eden, they felt the Achdus because they're all one of Eden. But we know that the fact that there are Achdus among Eden comes with that Pchines Yechide from the Yiddish Neshama. Comes from the Yiddish Nefesh, the deep essence of the Neshama Vayid. What is Hecher Patam Vadas, which is beyond logic and beyond Seichel, was they stem Ein Shabbos. Because in Tzad Seichel, there is no Achdus. Tzad Seichel, everyone is different. But the Yid has a Neshama, which is beyond Seichel, and Mitzad, the Nekudas Hayados, was Yishay Rebi, Kenid Mechner Belev. This Nekudas Hayad, the Yiddish Pintele, we call it, the Etzem HaNeshama that's in the Yid, is not, it says in Chassidus, not in the brain found, nor in the heart. But those things is gal geworden by Yidden B'Tzias Mitzrayim. That already was revealed in Yidden when they went on Mitzrayim. But those gewirkt and gepeilt and Vayichon Shem Yisrael Kishechot. That caused the Achdus. So according to the Mechilta, the Achdus came from Teirah, And the Mechilta says, not the Mechilta, which is not Pshat, not simple the way we look at it. It's possible that Matan Torah had Ashpah before. Pshat, you can't say that because the Torah wasn't given yet. So that's why, according to Pirush Rashi, which is Pshuta Shemikro, the Ardis came because they are K'ish Echad, because it's a Yichasham, they're all Yisrael, which means because you're a Yid. And what does that mean? That Yid has an Neshama. And that they had already from not what Matan Torah started. It started from Yitzias Mitzrayim. So that's why Vayichan Sham Yisrael K'ish Echad. Und das Gufe is eine Gestane K'ish Echad, mit dem Giluf and the Kudah Sayadis, and this fact that they were K'ish Echad because there was the revelation of this, the Kudah of the Etzem of the Neshama, that brought them also to feel the Hachone and the Chukya and the desire to Matan Torah. So here we see the difference in the Mechilta and Rashi of Chassidus. Then the Rebbe continues. Now, even though we just said that if we're talking about this Achdus that the Yidden have, only is by Yidden, but die Pchine for Amblaise by Yidden, it's only by Yidden, because the only Yidden have this Yechidische Benefesh. From deswegen, wir bald, as a Zelum as also became, but on the other hand, because Hashem made everything parallel, that there's a side of Gdusha, and there's a similar thing in the side of Klippe. So something similar to the Nekuda of Ardus, we have by non-Jews also. From Klippe, it says that Klippe tries to imitate and become similar to Gdusha. The Loshen is like a monkey tries to imitate a person. So there are certain things that Klippe has similar to what we have. And with this movement, so we understand, but say by the Mitzrayim, the Dugma, so then was given by the Bnei Yisrael is given during from Belev Echad was given Kishechad. That's why they also were able to have this union of Echad, Belev Echad. We said before the Belev Echad only could come with Satira, but that's not a Pipshat. A Pipshat, it only could come from the Kudas Hayadis. So how was it by Mitzrayim, the union of Belev Echad? So he says, but now we'll understand why. Because since by Yidden there is, they should also have. They should also have the concept, possibly to a certain degree, Belev Echad, which is the feeling of one. It's to Klippe, because the feeling of one feeling in everybody against the Yidden, but it's a feeling of one, which is something good. They had it because this is what Kedusha has, so they also have. And that caused K'ish Echad that they all did the same thing. The Chilek is over now, but the difference, like I said before, by Nit Iten is Nitchaychas the Reifen for Nisartas Hamitis Mitzadatzim K'ish Echad. By non-Jews, there's no such thing that they should have beside themselves K'ish Echad, because K'ish Echad is only by the people, meaning because they are Yidden, and only Yid has that. What they did have K'ish Echad is as a result of Belev Echad, since in their heart they had all the same hatred, and that itself was shaykhs by them, that made that they should be Ba'achdas also mitzad themselves, inside the people. Shenke by Yidden, but the Kudas Yad is say sees by Yidden the Neshama, the Kudah of Yiddishkeit, the Kudah of the Neshama is the true Metzias of a Yid. That the move get on I sang das Gemura K'ish Echad, there it's K'ish Echad Gemura. Real. So it starts off with K'ish Echad, because the Yidden are able to do it. And that brought about Belev Echad. But by the Mitzrayim, it was the opposite. They had Belev Echad, and that they could have to a certain degree, and that made K'ish Echad, but the real Agdas between themselves couldn't come, because they don't really have it. Then the Rebbe explains. Even though we just said that the real Agdas that Yidden have is only by Yidden, because they have the Yechide, and by non-Jews it's not Shaykhs. Afal Pikein still, the Baldas Matan Torah took it on Kidu, the Bitla Gzeire, so it mafsi given, zwischen Alyenim and Tachtenim. First there was this decree, a separation between above and below, Ruchnis and Gashmis. By Matan Torah, Deibishter took away this separation, zwischen Elokus and Nivroim and Elokus and Nivroim. So all the Nivroim also got something. Matan Torah, it was only by Yidden. It caused in the whole world there should be no more real separation between Ruchnius and Gashmius, godliness and Welt. But so it made that even the Goyim who don't have this Nekudas Hayadis, but because Matan Torah pill on the whole world, that there should be Ruchnis in Lukus in the world, so it made that they should also be able to a certain degree feel the Keach Haliki that's there in them. And when they feel to a degree the Keach Haliki that's there in the Welt, which the union of the Lukus is Achdus, So they also get a certain level of Achdus, bedugma to the Achdus von Eden. Similar to the Achdus of Eden. Aber nicht Mamesh, not the same. Weil sie sagen, in die Scheiche zu der Herren, wie das ist bei Eden, die Prinzip Elokus ist Lagamer Hecha von Welt. Jeden feel Elokus, which is Achdus, which is beyond the world. The Goyim can't feel the real Elokus, which is beyond the world. And was dafke mit der Pchine is in Elokus, where the Emes Achdus each Echad. By Eden, they have it, because only this level of Elokus, which is beyond the world, you can have real Achdus. Goyim don't have it. But a certain level of Achdus they have, because there is a certain level of Elokus that they could feel. Und der Inyan, and this, as noch Matan Teire, eich nicht in a Scheiche zu Pchines Elokus, was is Hecher von Seichel, Schalkus. Now that we said that they have a certain degree of Achdus, of feeling Elokus, which is beyond Seichel, and Seichel represents the Chalkas, as we said before, many differences. So they also have it. We find a halacha which expresses this concept. The din is like this. As the kiyum von Sheva mitzvahs v'neneach darf sein, the Rambam says that when we tell there's a din that the goyim have to keep their 7 mitzvahs, so the Rambam says it should be nit nehecha adas, not because in Seichel they understand that's the right thing to do. Not even because David said this to Adam Rishon, and said this to Neach. Nor, why? The Rambam said they should see HaKadosh Baruch Hu behen b'Teira, because in the Teira the Eibishter said that the Goyim have to do. They beyond all the Moshe Rabbein, and the Eibishter told through Moshe Rabbein in Teira, Shebnei Neach Mekeitem, that Neach got that, and they have to keep it for that reason. So we see that the Goyim do have a connection to Matan Torah, which is Elokus, and which is Achdus. Since every person has to say the world was created for me, everyone has to feel that the whole world was created for him. From the lowest category, from the Daimim, and all the way all to the human being. And every person has, everything has its tachlis, to make from the Rabbim, from Rishus HaRabbim, from the many, to make it into Achdus, into one. Because really everything's from the Eibush, which is one, but it's not Begillah, we have to be Megala it. Everyone has to try as much as he can, not to make this on Teira V'Yadis, we should need not only to spread Teira and Yiddishkeit. Amongst Yidden, also to affect, influence the Goyim, as they all Mekayim saying the Sheva mitzvahs that who that they should do their mitzvahs. Mekayim saying and to do it because they said it in the Torah. So we have this obligation, and the Rebbe wanted we should also see that the Goyim do their mitzvahs because they gave in the Torah. It all is because Matan Torah had an effect on them too. Obviously, it's not the same as Eden, but we see their connection because you see that the Eibush wanted they should keep it because it's an expression, an extension of the Torah. So this all fits to what he said before, that they also could have that Achdus, but not the same way that we have.
Yeshkayich, Rabbi Shapiro.
You're welcome.
That very nice.
Good to know.